I'm going to start with Alex. Alex is the award-winning author of 5 novels. And we've got Tania, and she does children's books, science fiction, and most recently, romance novels. And she's also done a lot of short fiction as well, for which she's won major prizes in New Zealand. But I'm going to hand over to them. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself in your own words?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the novels and short stories. I also have 2 little boys, ages 6 and almost 9. So it's been quite a challenge. There was a question that came through via email about working full-time and writing. So having a job and having children and writing does become challenging, but there are ways around it, and we can talk about that later. But so yeah, and I'm in Cape Town at the moment, and we are planning to move to Ireland in about 2 years. So that's me, and I'm working on something at the moment, a youth novel this time.
Great. And Tania?
Well, as you said, Nicola, I'm write in a few different genres. So I have 2 different pen names, and one pen name I started off with children's books and moved into science fiction and urban fantasy, and I started writing romance under a different pen name, which is kind of my bread and butter, pays the bills. Yeah, I write full time, and I live in Australia, and it's very wet here today with the floods. So excuse me if you can hear a bit of background noise, it's the rain.
All right, fabulous. Well, so you can see you're in good hands. So who would like to start with some questions?
We had some questions come through. Shall we start with them?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. So Leanne's first question was, how do you balance working full-time with writing a novel?
Okay, shall I? So one thing, the question made me think of a time when I just had my first little boy, and I got a commission from Macmillan Publishers, and I really didn't feel like I had the time in the day to do it, but I found that between the 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. feeds, wasn't getting much sleep anyway, so I dedicated those early morning hours to writing, and it worked out well. I met the deadline and I got the books published, and I'm still earning royalties from them 9 years later. So I think the point is that if you are absolutely determined, even though it may seem like you are exhausted and that you don't have the hours in the day, there probably are at least an hour or 2 hours that you could use to focus on your writing if you really, really want to get it done. And then just also to turn off any internet, mute your phone, and make sure that in those 2 hours you're not doing any Facebook searching or research on the internet at the same time, because those sort of things can just use your writing hours up, and then you don't have that. So you have to be really kind of hardcore about focusing on the hours, and do it maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And yeah, that's what I would say if you're working and trying to get a novel written.
Oh, thanks. I found when I was working and writing that I would always write in my lunch hour, and the beauty of that was that it looked like I was working. But I'd take that hour and just write and put some headphones in, and I found that if I listened to coffee shop noises, I get into the zone of writing really quickly. So that always works for me, turning off the internet and putting on some coffee shop noises. And a lot of friends of mine get up early and write before work, but I've never been a morning person, and I'm actually better to take my laptop up and write for an hour before I go to sleep. So I think just whatever works for you, when you're creative, when you're awake, in my case, just squeeze it in when you can. But the other thing I think I always found is that if I could do even a little tiny bit every day, it was easier to get back into it. If I left it for more than a day or two, I would struggle to get my head back into the writing space. Whereas if I just even did, 15, 20 minutes, then the next day when I came to it, I got into it much quicker because it was all fresh in my mind. And often also, if you go to sleep thinking about it, when you wake up, you have all kinds of ideas and you can dash off a little bit before you go to work or whatever, then that's quite good too. Cool. Those are my tips.
Thanks.
Any tips to help fire up creativity? So I'm thinking also, if you're a working person, how can you get into the zone more quickly? How can you fire up your creativity?
I think that if you really want to get that novel written, you just have to think of it as a professional task. And when you have a job, you often don't feel like going to work, or there's a part of the job you don't really fancy, but you just have to do it. So you have to adopt that kind of mindset. Can't really wait around to feel inspired, I don't think. I think you just have to sit yourself at your desk or wherever you're writing at the time that you've said you're going to do it each day or every second day or whatever it is, and just write and just make yourself do it. Because if you wait until you're inspired, or there may be some things, maybe Tania's got a special way of doing it, but I think that I often didn't feel like writing at 2 a.m. in the morning, but I just made myself do it. And then, after a few sentences, you kind of get into it. And then by the time you've done a paragraph, it's all going fine. And then just when you enter it, it's 4 a.m. and it's all over. But that's okay, because you can come back the next day. So I think it's a question of being really disciplined. And that's what I think. I think if you really want to get your skills up, you just have to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But I think that you can also find your own triggers as well. I mean, everyone's different, but I find, as I was saying, listening to coffee noises helps me. Sitting in cafes really helps me. I can write so much more in cafes than I can at home. If you find things that actually work for you and can use those little tricks to get your brain in the mode, then that can really help as well. But discipline, like Alex said, agree.
There was a little note about getting over rejection. It's really hard. And I think that one of the things, so short stories, if we're focusing here really on short stories, not novels, as far as I understand. And I think the thing is just to keep writing more stories and have a kind of a cycle of things that you've sent out, and just keep sending out, because the selling of your stories is really, I mean, for me, there was a question about what's your favorite part of the writing process. The whole writing process is actually my favorite part. The part I absolutely hate is trying to sell things. And I think that part of that is that rejection. And it never really gets better. But you just have to know that everybody gets rejected, and don't expect every single story to get accepted. Although I know Nicola does believe that every story has a home, and maybe you're right. But I just think you
Sorry, I'm so late.
Just keep the flow of submissions going, so that you've always got something out there to hope for, so that there's always hope.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It never gets any easier being rejected, although I do think that when you've written, after you've written, you know, a fair number of stories and you've got a few under your belt, it becomes easier to take criticism on the ones that you've written. At the beginning, it feels like every word is precious. I know, well, that's how it felt for me anyway. And when I got criticism, or, you know, an editor said, oh no, that's not working, or my critique partner said that's not working, it was quite difficult for me to step back from that and make the changes that were needed. And now it's become quite easy for me. I mean, not easy. I had to delete about 6,000 words of my novel last weekend, and that was painful, but it gets easier to look at things more objectively and say, okay, that's not working because of this. I'll just rip out all those words that I sweated over and put new ones in, and they'll be better. And the same thing with Rejection. You know that you know, that story might not have been right for that place, but it doesn't mean it's not right for another place. So, you know, you just you get a little bit hardened to it.
Tania, you mentioned having a writing partner. Is that somebody that just critiques your work?
Yes, and I think there was a question about number one piece of advice for aspiring writers, and I was going to mention that in mine, because the thing that made a huge difference to me when I first started was joining a critique group and getting just with a group of other writers who were around the same, you know, starting out as well, and we would just read each other's work and give feedback. And I think I grew a lot as a writer, and I would not have been, you know, able to progress without them. It was a very valuable thing, and I'd recommend it to anyone to find someone or a group of people, whether it's in person or online, that you can share the journey with, and you can help each other and support each other. And you know, your tribe's really important when it comes to progressing and improving. And so that would be my number one thing that I would recommend. And groups like this are fantastic, you know, being able to talk to people about who understand what you're trying to do and help you get there. So.
And we're so lucky now to have the internet that can help, you know, the fact that we're all in different parts of the world, but that we can meet like this. And in fact, so Jean at the bottom is part of an online group that we did start, and that's been running for several months. So this group started with the challenge that you're on they did it in September, and they're still going. It's many months later. They've had huge publishing successes, and they're doing so great. And you know, now they're talking about how they can continue on their own without our input, because of course that's the goal, to form an online writing circle. So I'm just having another look here. There's a question about how did you get your work published? You mentioned that Macmillan approached you to write, but how do you actually get to that level?
Well, with short stories, it's actually although it's very challenging to get published, it's easier to approach possible outputs for publication with short stories, because there are really around the world thousands of literary journals, either print or online, and anthologies that are being created of short stories all the time. So really it would be about researching, if you've got an existing story that you want to send out, researching what publications might be suitable, and then sending it out, and knowing that there is going to be a high percentage of rejection. And I think that managing expectations, you know, one of my pieces of advice is for writing is also, once you've written something, to just manage your expectations about what the outcomes will be for it. And so don't pin all your hopes on one story or one novel or whatever. Just keep writing. and keep researching the right places to send it to, and send it out and edit and send out again and write more and keep sending things out to. There's a lot of information about journals that are taking submissions.
Maybe you could just tell us very briefly about your own experience of when you started out, how you got published the first time.
So when I again started with short stories, and did get a couple published in journals, but then I quickly I started writing children's books not too long after that. So then I just my first children's book I sent to the slush pile of Scholastic, and it got picked up just out of the slush pile. And then when I started writing romance, I sent to the slush pile again of a romance publisher in the States, and it got picked up out of the slush pile. So slush piles, you know, people disparage them, but it's the way I got published. And now I've turned to self-publishing. I'm a big enthusiastic proponent of self-publishing, and I almost exclusively self-publish now, although I do have a couple of things going on with traditional publishers, but I love self-publishing, and I think it's given new opportunities to people to get published, and there are some people doing some really great books, really good stuff in the self-publishing world. So yeah, I'm very enthusiastic.
Tania, sorry to interrupt. What is a slush pile, and isn't self-publishing costly?
Okay, a slush pile is when the publisher says we're open to unsolicited manuscripts, so you don't need an agent to send to the publisher. You can just send your manuscript in, and it will sit in a big pile of other manuscripts that they never asked for, and until someone gets around to reading it, in which case they'll either, you know, send it back or to you and say no thank you, which has happened to me many times, or they'll accept it, which has also happened to me, and it's quite nice when it happens. But don't think that they never accept things from the slush pile, you know. But another thing that you can do is if you go to conferences or, you know, and meet someone in the industry, they will often say, yes, send it to me, and then you can send manuscripts to publishers and say, I met you at such and such a conference. You don't necessarily need an agent to get your work out there. I was going to say that you can also approach, just because you're living in South Africa or New Zealand, it doesn't mean you can't send your work to agents and publishers in the States, for example, or in the UK or anywhere else. A lot of them will accept worldwide submissions, so that's not a barrier at all. And in fact, my romance novel was pulled out of the slush pile of a US publisher, so I just sent it to them.
Amazing. So I'm going to, Liz, I'm going to come back to some of your questions later, because I want to try and give everyone a chance, because we've only got half an hour left. So and I've also got some other questions here from Clive and Leanne. So Clive, did you want to kick off with your question?
Yeah, I mean, as budding writers, we've always been, you know, we're always exhorted to, you know, read anything we can get our hands on. And I was just wondering, does the audiobook phenomenon change the way we actually write? Or has it changed your writing? The fact that reading and listening are two different type of experiences.
That's a really interesting question. I actually haven't thought about that. We were, before this meeting started, we were talking about audiobooks, because I heard via Penguin Random House in South Africa that audiobooks are their new big kind of target growth area, because at this point Penguin Random House here doesn't really do a lot with audiobooks. We haven't connected somehow with Audible yet. I'm sure there are other platforms other than Audible, but that seems to be one of the bigger ones. But in terms of it affecting my writing, I don't know. I mean, I don't actually listen to a lot of audiobooks. My children listen to a lot, and I know that commuters who are driving listen to a lot. So I can't say that for me it's changed. But I also do know that, I mean, when people are giving editing advice, one of the big editing tips is to read your work aloud. And I think that that in that way you hear whether it sounds right or doesn't sound right, or the pace lags. So I actually think that a story that's narrated aloud or read, I think the qualities are the same. The character development, the descriptions that, you know, transport the readers, the plot. I don't know that it makes too much difference if it's a narrated book or a read book. I don't think so, really.
That's a very good answer, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I listen to a lot of audiobooks actually, and they're all read, printed book. You know, they're just the same. So I don't think there's any changes. I certainly don't think that I write specifically now. I mean, I've had some books put into audiobook, and it's been the written text with no changes. So I don't do anything differently for audiobooks, but it is, I do, when I'm editing, read the books aloud usually to hear how they sound. It's really useful. So.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sarah, did you have a question?
It's mostly been covered, actually. It was about rejection. If you keep having rejections and they're all sent back to you, how do you go about changing your story, altering it when they don't tell you anything? They just say, very nice, enjoyed reading it, but they don't tell you what's wrong. So how do you know what's wrong?
Well, I think Tania's having a writing partner or writing group is obviously a very helpful thing to have in that kind of case, where you get feedback from other people who really care about you and are going to give you some decent feedback. Also do think that, you know, sometimes stories just don't fit the bill for them for a particular publication. I mean, the story might actually be good or publishable, but just they don't want, that particular publication doesn't want to publish it. And you might send it to 10 publications who actually don't want to publish that story because they've just published a similar one, or it doesn't fit their brief at the moment or whatever. So it can be the problem of the story. And in that case, having a writing group that could give you feedback, or a tutor in a course or something, would be very useful. You can also, there are also people that will do pay, you know, if you pay, they'll give you a critique. I know we do that at the Writers' College for a short story, but it's not always necessary to go to those lengths. Yeah, it might just be a case of just keep sending it out. Literally, I mean, we had one of the tutors in one of our previous Zoom meetings told a very interesting story where she had submitted a story to You magazine, and they rejected it, and that was in 2005. And then she heard that the editor changed, and she sent it to the new editor in, let's say, 2010, and it was rejected again. And then recently, in the last year, they had a new editor, and she sent it to that editor, and the story has now been accepted. So, you know, the editor changed.
We also recently handed out an article, I think it came from Alex, to our students. And they said for every 100 stories you send out, only 3 will get accepted. So I suppose, you know, the moral of the story is not to be precious and to be writing a lot of stories, to have a huge portfolio and just enjoy the writing process. Tania,
Yeah, critique partners. I was just going to say again that critique partners are so valuable, and just keep writing more stories. I mean, and be comforted by the fact that we've all had hundreds of rejections, if not, you know, more. So I know that one of the, there's an author who talks at conference, who's Christy Craig. She's very successful, has dozens of books, but when she comes to do a talk at conference, she brings along a suitcase and she empties it on the floor, and it's full of rejection letters. And she had over 10,000 rejection letters when she started out. So, so be comforted that it happens to everyone, and if you keep going, then you'll eventually, I'm sure, you'll have some successes as well.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Thank you.
Can I just add also, in that article that Nicola was referring to, the author made an interesting point, which was that each story that you write is also a skill development exercise. So it's not just about getting it published. You could be experimenting with genre or developing a certain type of character or setting or whatever. So all the writing that you do is practice. And if you think of other things, tennis players or whatever, they put in hours and hours of practice before the big match. So, you know, you just, everything that you do, every word that you write is helping you to become a better writer.
Thank you very much.
Is it realistic to think that you can actually make a career and earn a living out of writing? Entering the writing world now, there's so many writers, there's so many people that are established as writers. Is it realistic to think you can actually still enter the market now and make a living off writing?
Yes, it is absolutely realistic. Is it easy? No. I think there are a lot of, as you say, it's a very crowded marketplace. I think self-publishing has opened up a lot of opportunities for people. If you can write good books that people want to read, then yes. I think a lot, and this, I'm just going by my experience here. Obviously, I'm more in the self-publishing world these days than the trad pub world, but the people that I know that are doing very well are all typically hybrid. So they have some trad pub and some indie. So some self-published novels and some traditionally published novels, because the traditional publishing world moves quite slowly. So if you sell a book to a publisher, you might see it on the shelves in a year or two, and then they'll want another book maybe a year later, and nobody can live on, unless you're a big name and your book sells amazingly well, it's difficult to live on that kind of money that you get. So if you self-publish as well, you can put out books to your own schedule, and you're in charge of everything, including the marketing and everything else. So it's a big learning curve, and it isn't an easy way to go, but I definitely know quite a few people who are making a living, and even as a new writer, people are always looking for new books. So if you write well and people want to read what you write, then yeah, I think it is definitely feasible.
Just going to add, I think I think the thing not to do is to expect your first novel to be a bestseller. I think that is a huge mistake. And weirdly enough, even when I've told people that, they do seem to somehow think that their novel's going to be different to all the other first novels that are getting published, and that could be thousands every month around the world. The likelihood of your first novel being a bestseller is virtually nil. There's a tiny possibility, but it's not really worth pinning your hopes on that. And I think that out of volume comes the career. So my kind of thing is to say to aim to have 5 books published, and then you're starting to make a living. So don't quit your day job until you've got 5 books published. And if that means that you are self-publishing 3 of them and you've had 2 others published by a trade publisher, then you know that you've got your 5. But I think even in the self-publishing, Tania, I'm not sure, but you'll know that the more books you've got, the more sales you get, because the person will read one and then they'll go and pick up your other ones if they like that one. So the more you publish, the more you are heading towards making a living out of that career. So don't expect your first novel to buy you a mansion.
Thank you.
So
100% agree.
I'm going to answer this question from Liz here that says, Austin Macaulay wanted 50,000 to self-publish my novel. So that's, I think, vanity publishing, and self-publishing can virtually be free, although we don't recommend that, because we do at the college recommend that you hire a designer to do your cover, or there are free programs. You know, Canva has got lovely book covers now, which didn't exist 5 years ago. But you can do it virtually free. But certainly editing, we never recommend that a writer edits their own work. And we would absolutely recommend not asking a friend to edit your work either, but that you do hire somebody. And if you go to Upwork or Fiverr, these are big global platforms where you can hire editors. They're all competing against each other. So the rates have come right down. And, you know, if you've got 70,000 words, it is one of your biggest expenses to get that edited properly, but it is essential.
Just was wondering, when you start writing with an idea to submitting things and getting things published, and you have your initial idea of your story or your characters, how much do you worry about, so this is going to be my reader, this is going to be the genre, is this going to sell? Or do you just write it as authentically as you can and trust that it will find its home or find its niche? How much do you structure it towards something in the beginning?
I was going to say, when I started out, I didn't think about any of those things like genre and marketing and everything. And as the more I think about them, the better off I am. Because at the end of the day, what you're writing is a product that people are going to buy. And whether you're pitching it at a publisher or pitching it, or you're going to self-publish it, without some idea of who's going to buy it and what genre it fits into, and who your reader is going to be, it's going to be very difficult to sell, whether you're pitching it to a publisher or selling it to yourself, trying to sell it yourself. So more and more, I would recommend that you do that if you can do that, as long as it doesn't stifle you creatively. Then definitely, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I agree, definitely from the selling point of view, that it does make it easier if you focused on a particular genre, and you know, we talked about those 5 books that you're going to write before you quit your day job. If they were all in the same genre, that would definitely make it easier for you to quit your day job. But from developing your skill as a writer, I think to allow yourself, especially in the beginning, the room to play, to experiment, to have fun with different genres, I think you should allow yourself that gift, because later on, if you do get tied in with a publisher and they demand the same genre from you. I know some writers who've won international prizes, science fiction prizes, and you know, the one friend got into writing serial killer novels, and the publisher just wanted that from her. And she actually really didn't want to write another serial killer novel, but she had to, because she was contracted to them and they'd paid her a huge advance for, you know, a 3-book deal. So I think in the beginning, be playful, have fun, but know that if you are experimenting with genres, you probably won't make that much money. And then maybe later on, when you've put in the 10,000 hours, then focus on a genre and really look at, because then you'll know which genre you actually want to write in.
Mark.
When we get given the prompts during these courses, I find it really easy to write to those. But when I try and write by myself, I can write poetry till the cows come home, but then trying to write short stories, I sort of stumble a little bit. How would I go around that?
Alex, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I find is a helpful inspiration is to locate a point of anger in yourself, something about the world that you don't like, that you want to change passionately, and because it's something that you feel strongly about. I think the best stories come out of an inspiration that you feel strongly about. And if it's something positive, a joy or whatever, then that's also really lovely. But often one can really, the things that infuriate you can be the things that provoke some of your most creative writing, I think. The things that change, how you can use your writing to change the world by creating this scene. I mean, one of the writers that, at the moment I'm reading a lot of with my sons is Roald Dahl. And Roald Dahl has this incredible sense of social justice. He creates these terrible baddies. And then there's always a little person like Matilda, or, who manages to overcome them with such cleverness, and it's just, he's such a delight, and his short stories actually have that in them as well. So he clearly has this very strong sense of the underdog and making sure that those real baddies, the blood bottling giants of the world, don't triumph. And I think that, so he's got that as a constant thread. So if you can find your thing that you want to make right with your story in a way, the way that he, makes the baddies get their comeuppance, and that could be a way of finding inspiration.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that it's kind of a bit of a muscle as well, that the more you do it, the better attuned you get to the process of doing it. So if you're using the writing prompts and able to write stories and keep doing that, and even making your own kind of prompts and things, then you'll start picking up, when you're watching TV or talking to someone will say something, it'll just trigger something in your head, and you'll think, oh, there's a story, but it's a muscle that you develop and get better at using as the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Right. I'm just going to then just do a final round. Just put your hand up if you had another question that you'd like to ask. Candace.
Anna, please, sorry. I just want to know, for our writers here, how much of your storyline have you developed, or your plot have you developed before you start writing? Does it evolve? You don't have to have the ending in sight. Does it evolve, or do you have the whole thing planned out, start to finish, with a few things that come along the way? Or do you just start writing and see where it takes you?
Tania. Okay, Alex.
I personally, I mean, everyone's process is different, I think. So what I do may not necessarily help you, because I think you find your own way of working, and what suits your brain. But the way I do it is I'm really good at first chapters. First chapters come to me all the time, and I've written so many first chapters, and sometimes I just run out of steam after the first chapter. And then sometimes I think, no, this has really got legs, and then I'll sit down and work out what the story is. And that's a weird way to do it, I know, but I usually don't know what the ending is until I've written at least the first quarter of the book. And then I'll start thinking, oh, I better figure out what the ending is. And then I'll kind of work it out as I go. But I do kind of plot, but I need to get all that first rush of the creative energy, and you think, oh wow, this is a great story, I've just got to get this bit out. I'd like to get that all out first so that I've got it, and before the analytical part of my brain kicks in, and then I plot it and I go, okay, how's the pacing gonna be, and where are my story arcs and all that kind of thing. So I like to do all that creative rush first, and then the plotting, and then work out what my ending will be.
I also I've experimented with different ways of doing it. Sometimes it's just kind of happened, and then if I haven't really given much thought to the plot, you can kind of see that eventually things become a bit rambly, but then in editing you can fix it all, because that's the wonderful thing about editing, is that actually the first draft it's so far from the final book. Or even the final story. I'm having done the 5 stories challenge now, to see the change in the first draft of stories and the final drafts of stories, of student stories, has actually been amazing. So I think that I did once try to plot out a thing where I wrote out what was going to happen in every single chapter, and I knew exactly the ending. And I find that helps if you have if you have a very busy schedule and you're really struggling, if you're working at the same time, then to have a very clear idea of how many words you're going to write in each chapter and exactly what the chapter is going to be when you sit down at the desk, it's very helpful. But whether that makes for a better novel or not, I'm not sure. And even in that one, I found that quite a lot of things changed by, let's say, the 4th draft. But for the initial first draft, it actually was quite helpful to make a 40-chapter plot plan. And then, when I had my hour and a half that I could write each day, I would just sit down and I belt out that chapter, 2,000 words, done.
Yeah, I've started countless books. I've got the first chapter of so many, and then because I can't think of an ending, I don't carry on. Then I go into the next one and hope that within the first chapter I'll be able to think of the end, and then when I don't, I'll put that one to the side and start the next one. So it's interesting, you don't need to start with it, you just keep going and develop it as it goes along.
You know what really helped me, Candice, was thinking, because I'm exactly like that. I've got so many first chapters, and for a long time I was just the same as you. I couldn't write any more than that. And what really helped me was thinking, okay, what I actually need is 2 ideas that join together to become one book. So 2 big ideas. So usually my first chapter is I'll have a big idea about 2 people or a situation or something, but that's all I've got. But then I'll maybe get an unconnected idea and it'll fit in somehow. And then I've got 2 big ideas, and I'll join them together to make one book. And then I can go further than the first chapter. So I don't know if that will help you.
That's interesting.
But that really helped me.
It's really interesting.
So Tania, is that like the plot and then the subplot?
No, it's more like 2 parts of the same plot. So say, for example, I've had an idea, say, okay, for my science fiction, for a science fiction novel, I was thinking, okay, they're going to be a transfer of consciousness. So that was my idea for the story, but then I didn't actually have a story. I was like, okay, so what's actually going to happen in this book? Like I could picture the first chapter and how describing this thing, that the mechanism and everything, but then until I got the idea for there being this kind of contest that people would have to be in, then that's when I had an actual plot for the story. So it's kind of joining 2 ideas together, if you know what I mean. So yeah.
Candice? Have you ever tried, I mean, with all those first chapters that you've got there, have you ever tried imagining that one of those first chapters is actually the last chapter, and that's the ending, not the beginning, and you write the story towards that point?
I haven't done that. I agree with Mark there.
Quite a lot of
I haven't done that.
who work on series, you know, they write out their series, maybe 3 books or 4 books, and then they kind of don't have anywhere to go after that, and then you'll see they'll do a prequel to the whole story. So maybe what you need to do is find one of those chapters and write the prequel, in a sense, so you use that one of those first chapters as the last.
Yeah, thank you.
Or you could turn the chapters into a short story.
All the different ones.
So I'm just going to quickly answer a question that Leanne sent in, or just asked the question. She said, tools like Scrivener, sorry, are they helpful? Should one use them? And if not, why not?
I use Scrivener, and I absolutely love it. It's especially if you're writing novels or series, I actually think it can be very helpful, because I write in Scrivener. So it basically, if you don't know what it is, it's kind of like Word, only each of your chapters is kind of a different document in one file. Like it's kind of an organizational thing, and at the bottom you've got a whole lot more repositories where you can put in all sorts of things like characters, places, notes to yourself, a synopsis, and you've got different views to see everything. And I find extremely helpful is when I write in Scrivener, I'll have the entire series in one file. So I'll have book 1, book 2, book 3, and then down the bottom there'll be a folder for characters. So whenever I introduce a new character, I'll make a little document with the name of that character and put it in my character folder. And then, because I'm hopeless with remembering things, when I'm writing and I think, oh, who was that person that I introduced in chapter 1, and I can see their name in the character file. And then if I click on it, I've also entered, they've got, you know, dark hair, and they've got this character trait, and this happened. And so I've got it, it's all in one repository. So when you're writing, it makes things very easy to find and keep continuity, and I find it invaluable. So yeah, I love Scrivener.
Last question. This can be for everyone. So the question to Alex and Tania, your number 1 piece of advice for an aspiring writer?
Obviously the first one is just to keep writing. I can't think of a better thing to do than just to write. And then, well, Tania's got the one that follows on from that.
Yeah, I think I've already said mine, which is find your writing buddy, or your, you know, support to help you find your tribe, and it makes it a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds silly to say just write, but I know a lot of people come and say, oh, I've got this novel I want to write, and they tell me a whole plot about it, but they haven't actually started writing it. And so, you know, it's no good having lots of ideas. It's better just to have a writing schedule and sit down every day and write. And even if you're only writing the first chapter of a whole lot of different novels every day, that's also fine. But just keep, you know, just practicing your skill as a storyteller, as a writer, as a creator of characters and places and that sort of thing. So just to write, actually.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap up. We've got 1 minute to go. I just wanted to say a huge thank you, Tania and Alex, for being here tonight and for sharing your wisdom and your hard-won experience with everyone, and also to all of you. it's been wonderful getting to know all of you over the last week, and just seeing your writing and seeing the improvements, the daily improvements. So exciting and rewarding for us. So and I'm hoping that tonight has just given you a broader perspective of where you could be heading with your writing if you keep writing. So yeah, thank you so much for coming.